Hope everyone is doing well. Happy Saturday. So glad that you are joining us today for another Connect with Yasmine. My name is Yasmine-Imani McMorrin. I'm incredibly honored to be running for Culver City Council. During the day, I serve as the Interim Dean of Students and Director of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion at USC Gould School of Law. For our city, I serve as the Vice Chair for the General Plan Advisory Committee. As it indicates at the bottom, would love for you to share out the stream to your friends and followers. We always love getting the word out. Our hashtags are #Team Yasmine and #Vote McMorrin. So thank you in advance for getting the word out. We're getting so close to Election Day, so the more folks in Culver City who have the opportunity to learn about me and learn a little bit about what we're about is super helpful. And throughout the stream, if you have any questions, please indicate it in the comments and we'll do our best to respond and get back to you. So welcome again to another Connect with Yasmine. Just a little bit about our campaign goals here for Team Yasmine. I'm all about centering equity and inclusion. So whether that's our policy decisions, whether that's our budget, really making sure that our budget allocations reflect our collective values, and making sure that we have a safe and thriving neighborhoods, also including our businesses, but of course our overall community. So that means, thinking more about affordable housing, thinking about transit and mobility, thinking about our environment, and of course, supporting closing the Inglewood oil field. So really all of these areas, and of course, our unhoused neighbors, that goes hand in hand in the housing conversation. So thinking about all these different aspects of what our community looks and feels like, and making sure that as we're moving forward, as we're, getting more companies coming in and all of this development, that all members of our community can really move forward collectively into the future together. So making sure everything has an equitable lens. So today, I'm super excited to have Councilman Daniel Lee join us today. He was the first, or is the first, African-American or first Black council member ever in Culver City's history. So super honored to have him here. Also, he's just like super dynamic on the dais, incredibly unapologetic, always really illustrating and standing up for working families in our community, both thinking about the environment, housing, our tenants, and supporting renters. So super honored to have him on today. So welcome so much, Daniel Lee. Thank you for joining us. So why don't you share a little bit about yourself for the people?
Sure. And first, I just want to say thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here and a pleasure to support your campaign. I think one of the things that I want to say before I say a little bit about myself, I think it's really astounding the potential to level up in terms of the resume of the council that we have and the batch of candidates that we have with you and Freddie Puza and some others. I think, there's a really great combination of like the data-driven, evidence-based academic background merged with action, activism, and organizing that will be coming to our council. I don't want to say hopefully, I want to say will be on November 3rd. So I'm really looking forward to like the brain trust on the council becoming even more dynamic and diverse and incredibly talented. As Yasmine said, I was elected in 2018, the first Black city council person. And, I went back and forth around how to talk about that. And I'm curious about what Yasmine thinks in the context of being the first Black female council person. And I believe the first council woman of color, period, and November 3rd. And the complexity that comes with that. I think a lot of people don't want to talk about race, which is complicated and impossible in the United States. But a lot of other people see it as an essential component of our identity. And it's a essential component of mine. Obviously, I'm, also in my full-time work with Reverend James Lawson at the James Lawson Institute. Um, I'm in semester 5 out of 6 in my doctorate program at USC in social work, focusing on income inequality and generational poverty. And very just generally an activist and organizer around a litany of progressive issues from the environment to social justice and police accountability to corporate accountability. And I'm just very happy to be here and looking forward to the conversation.
That's awesome. Yes, and shout out Fight On. So let's just dive in. I know you made a comment about my thoughts about being a first, and I'm really excited about it. Thinking about my decision to run and just thinking about what representation means, not only just for me and the Black community, but just for all families of color, all little girls who can look, I'm also a little young, right? So it's like it sort of opens the door. And I think sort of a covert way, I guess, in terms of what's possible for you to walk into. I know everything's virtual now, but to walk into chambers and see a younger face, see a face of color, see a Black face, and that speaks to I say a lot about us really living our values through our budget and our policies. Like, I think that being elected and our community, one of the things that drove my family here and me here, made me choose Culver City intentionally to live, is the diversity, right? Our school district is incredibly diverse. You see it when you walk or ride or bike around town, and making sure that our council really celebrates that we have folks from all different lived experiences, have renters, have single moms, have parents, and have folks from all different backgrounds, because all different kind of people live in our community, and they should absolutely be represented. I'm all about pipeline building, making sure that there's more opportunities for folks to come in. And so, if things go the way we hope, we'll have our first Black woman of color on the council. We'll have our first LGBTQ plus individual on the council with Freddie Pouza. And, that's amazing. And I hope that we get to the point where we don't have these first and we're not always celebrating. But the fact that we still have them just shows that we have so much, still have a lot of work to do. We can celebrate how far we've come, but still know that there's lots and lots of more work to do. And I think that, that's the work.
Yeah, I was going to say, I was joking with some people at various events in the last few years who I hadn't met since I won in 2018. But I was just saying, I'm looking forward to people celebrating being like the 12th or like the 22nd. Because I sort of feel like the first should have happened in like 1982 or 1976 or something like that. But I think it's still a very valuable and still very worth celebrating. And I think you're right. People seeing a person that looks like them is so powerful. And it's such an antidote to imposter syndrome and a lot of things that our kids of color and women in particular suffer with, because we've been in such a white male dominated world. Obviously, a lot of poor white people deal with the same issue because class makes you think, oh, I'll never be there. Right. But I'm curious about your thoughts beyond diversity, because as you said, I tend to say exactly what I mean from the dais and in my personal life. It's just sort of in my DNA. I get it from my mom and my brother and my other brother and my sister. We're the same. But when it comes to diversity, I think sometimes people want to say the word and then put a period behind it and just like stop there. And for me, I really don't think that's enough because I think there are oppressive systems in place in our country, in California, in our county, and of course in our city. And they can't be fixed by just putting a person who looks different into an oppressive system if the system makes no substantive changes. So I'm curious about the thoughts you have about going beyond diversity and just the thought of diversity and maybe how that relates to your role at USC.
Yeah, so I have lots of thoughts, but let's try to streamline this. So they always say, diversity is being invited to the dance, and inclusion is actually being asked to dance. It's not my favorite metaphor for it, but it's not enough to be in the room. You absolutely have to be involved and treated, especially when we're thinking about equity and inclusion. There is absolutely a power analysis that has to take place in terms of, we have these folks in the room, but are we valuing what they have to say? Are we taking it seriously? Are we, giving it the same weight as traditionally the white voices that traditionally have the power and have been a part of the decision making for all this time? Are we addressing the systemic barriers? Are we building the pipeline so that this person doesn't have to be, the last one for some time? So it takes a lot of work, and it takes a lot of intentionality that sometimes folks don't really feel like doing. And especially, and thinking about USC, and I'm super proud of the students at Gould who are absolutely pushing, absolutely holding us as an administration responsible, absolutely keeping the pressure on, which they should, right? and where possible, I'm doing the same. I'm like, what is the timeline on this? When are we going to get our race in the law class? How are we going to make sure that we're not only saying that we support diversity, because we have I think this year we have over 50% or very close to 50% of our students in the incoming class are from underrepresented communities, which is fantastic. It's like over 50% are women. It's a wonderfully diverse 1L class, but it's like, now that they're here, now that we've given some of them these scholarships that we've allocated for students of color and women and, LGBTQ, what are we doing to ensure that the classrooms are truly inclusive? What are we doing to make sure that our professors are trained in how to deal with microaggressions, are trained to deal with race that is absolutely intertwined in the law? There's no, especially in this country, there's no way to talk about case law and, just property without thinking about race. And are we ensuring that our faculty are really ready to interject when there's an off-color comment? I mean, it's such a layered conversation, but it starts, of course, with folks being in the room, but really the work is making sure that those folks are empowered, that they're really valued in the conversation, and that the system is willing to absorb that push and really willing to change. But this is going to take work. I appreciate the community's calls for a Truth and Reconciliation Committee. Especially in the context of Culver City being a sundown city, sundown town, and the restrictive covenants and just the legacy of generational wealth that was not accessible to Black folks and folks of color in our town. And this is not unique to Culver City. It's happened, all over this nation. I think Glendale just acknowledged recently being a sundown city. I hope that Culver City can do that also. It's absolutely so important to acknowledge the harm that has taken place and really be intentional about this is how we're moving forward, and absolutely listening to folks who have been impacted. It's not super revolutionary, but it takes intentionality. And I think that that's where the work is. We have to move past just saying hey, look at our underrepresented communities and for the photo ops and for the first, but really making sure that we are listening, really making sure that we're open to shifting these systems that have caused it to be so hard for people to be in positions of power. So it takes a lot.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And I'd be very interested to know the timeline when the next council is seated, when we do take up that question, because I think, a very large part of healing is acknowledging a wrong. And acknowledging a wrong doesn't mean that it's all your fault. Right. It's just that a wrong happened. And I think, that's really essential to build on something together. And I hope we as a city are mature enough to acknowledge that the wrongs that the United States perpetrated on people of color, Black people in particular, but also Indigenous people, Latinx people, particularly in California, Asian American and Pacific Islander people, but Japanese American people in particular. But it's essential that we acknowledge those wrongs in order to move forward.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I want to ask you, I frequently am like giving you snaps, shouting you out on Twitter for just saying the thing. And it shouldn't be super hard to do that. But sometimes it is. Sometimes having that seat at the table, which you absolutely have, and saying like, no, I'm not. I know I'm not angry, or this is actually the statement that I said, or just really, I mean, it's just so exciting for me, for like other youth, for folks of color to see you really own that and like name when folks are trying to be in whatever way. And again, it's not always intentional, and it's like, absolutely, when we're talking about certain things where harm is taking place, either with its renters or thinking about this conversation that we're having right now about public safety, there's absolutely a reason to be passionate and be energized and be intentional, because people are being impacted, people are being harmed. So I often want to challenge that notion of civility, and not insinuating that you're never not being that you're never being disrespectful or anything like that, but the energy that people are expected to have. And I'm not even sure what this is. I don't think it's code switching, but it's like, what is that like for you to sort of have to deal with that balance and that expectation, but absolutely being unapologetic about where you stand and making sure that you're advocating for communities who are not often able to give public comment, and just that dynamic? Like, I'm so curious about that, because I appreciate it. I know so many families in our town absolutely do. So wanted to give you your flowers for that, because you're doing an excellent job.
Yeah, I think there's a tendency to characterize people of color and women who are straightforward and unapologetic as somehow overbearing or overly passionate. And there's a tendency to try to pit passion against evidence, as if those are two diametric poles and there's no way to be passionate with evidence. I feel like my colleague Megan Solly-Wells has felt this a lot, in particular, as well, as the only woman on the council for her, entire tenure, and has had like a lot of very sort of basic things that she said misconstrued as, overly emotional. I think some people have attempted to do the same thing with me. But if you know me personally, if you see me make comments on other council subjects, I'm pretty calm. I'm a pretty calm person generally. I like to tell people I'm a calm person, not a patient person, because I think being patient around injustice and mischaracterizations is idiotic. I think there have been a number of instances where some of my colleagues who might not agree with me specifically have gone so far as to use expletives from the dais and have not been called out. Yet I've been called out for like slightly raising my voice or correcting someone who has said something that was obviously incorrect and asking them to check the record. I don't consent to being mischaracterized, and I will not. And when someone says something that's blatantly false, rather than going in a circle and let us all say whatever we say and not having a comment, I will call them out because that shapes the discourse going forward. If nothing is challenged and someone makes a false statement, then people believe it going forward, whether or not they were on your side before or not. So I think it's incredibly important to come into these spaces as yourself. And as a candidate, I ran as myself. And when I spoke to people door to door on the phone, I told them what I believed, and I gave them genuine responses, even when what I believe clashed with what they believe. And I think that's the way that we should govern. We should govern and be elected on what we stand for. But then when we're elected, yes, we represent everybody.
Mm-hmm.
But representing everybody doesn't take away your own ability to make a decision, to look at the evidence, to look at the community input, to do your own research, and then to make a decision based on an amalgamation of those things. And I think that's all of our responsibility. But I hope when you join us on the council, you legislate in a similar way that does not ask you to leave yourself at home.
Mm-hmm. Listen, I said I was going to run as my full self. I've been trying to do that as much as possible. I hope it's resonating with folks, but, I didn't want to, I'm absolutely a single mom, unapologetic about equity, unapologetic about making sure that if I'm the first, Black woman or the first woman of color, that I won't be the last, like making sure that we're bringing folks in, and we got a shout out from Michelle Weiner. So yes, I absolutely agree. I wanted to shift a little bit over to, I know that folks are voting, so please, continue to use the official ballot drops, and I know voting centers open, I believe, next Saturday. I think that's when I'm going to vote. But I wanted to amplify our local measures, which are B and RE. So we're absolutely no on Measure B. We chatted about that last week with Council Member Sally Wells. We're absolutely no on B. B is bad and would really revoke the current tenant protections and rent control and make it so it has to come back via another 2 years for voters to vote with, to vote on it, and would absolutely stall the current progress and the current impact of housing stability in a pandemic for a vulnerable population. So I don't know, Daniel, if you'd like to add a little bit more on No on B, and then we can talk about RE and any other state propositions that you want to lift up.
Sure. I think, Measure B is an interesting way to sidestep the will of the people in disguise. I think it was very obvious that a very diverse set of renters and homeowners came to us last year and late spring, early summer, and told us that there was a crisis going on. We've known that there's a housing crisis in Southern California for a long time, but they got specific about how that's affecting people in Culver City. And they wanted us to put a rent freeze in place and then consider permanent rent control. After a year of engagement with large landowners, small landowners, I was actually a little annoyed that staff sort of prioritized the engagement with landowners and developers and landlords in particular. And I don't think there was enough renter engagement. But even in the context of that, even in a place where we had, waivers for landlords who might have an undue financial impact from the rent freeze, we had no landlords successfully submit a petition in that 1 year. And 1 year is not representative of the whole. I imagine if that year happened during this time of the COVID-19 pandemic, we would have had some successful applications. But with that being said, that you can't really separate Culver City's history as a sundown town from its history of not having rent control.
Absolutely.
Because for a very long time, if you were a person of color, the only thing that you could do in this city was rent. So you not being protected means people of color not being protected. And I've told people a very long time, it seems like the people vote in Culver City as if we're 90 to 95% homeowner. And we're almost 50% renter. Yeah. And I think there's this real confusion there. And I think the Measure B tries to capitalize on that. And it, it's called Protect Culver City because Protect Culver City Renters was the group that reached out to us. So it's intentionally mendacious. And it's really not looking at community. It talks about community, but it doesn't realize that the people who are being pushed out a lot of times are seniors who've lived here 20 or 30 years. Yep. A lot of times it's young people who want to live close to their family. They finish their undergrad, they finish their graduate degree, but they can't afford to find a place within 30 miles, then 40 miles, then 120 miles. And they want to be able to. I think this will enable people to stay in our community as we look at the other housing solutions that are desperately needed. We need more housing production. We need to do more ADUs. We need permanent supportive housing for unhoused individuals. But first, we need to keep people here, and voting no on B does that.
Yep, absolutely. Echo all of that. And thinking about Measure RE, we want to say yes on that. That is a transfer tax that will only affect any real estate exchanges that are 1.5 million and above. And it is a progressive tax, which I'm absolutely in support of. Maddie and I became homeowners over this summer. We wouldn't have been impacted by that, which is great. But if I think that folks should be supportive of our community. We live in a wonderful community. We take advantage of our city services and our parks and the roads and all these things. And so I don't think it's a heavy lift to ask for folks who are engaged in these sort of more expensive, higher level real estate exchanges to pay a little bit more to ensure the well-being of our community, especially thinking about how our general fund is disproportionately made up of sales tax, and our property taxes in comparison are relatively low in comparison to that. Making sure that we remain solvent as a city is incredibly important. So we definitely want to encourage folks to vote yes on Measure RE. There's information on the city website. There's like video about it and all sorts of additional information, because I guess folks are automatically like, no, I don't want any more taxes. And many folks would not be impacted by this. It's mostly going to be like commercial real estate or some of the higher end homes in our community. And I think the average home does sell for about 1.3 million based on the information that I saw from the city website. So most people in Culver City will not be impacted by this change at all. So we definitely want to encourage folks to vote yes on that. It will support our city moving forward and ensure that we have the same level of care that we're accustomed. I don't know if you want to.
Yeah, excuse me for interrupting you at the end, but I'm in complete agreement. I think one of the things that we've seen in our city is, as much as I appreciate the prior council's focus on redevelopment, because when I first moved to Culver City over 17 years ago, there were some holes. There were some places where it was just quiet and a lot of space was going unused. So I appreciate that there was some commercial development that made the place more lively, made downtown Culver City a destination, made the arts district a destination, made it a thriving place for new media content. I appreciate that, but what prior councils did not do is adequately develop housing.
Right.
And for that reason, both voting no on B and yes RE helps us slow down the displacement and the house flipping, the apartment building flipping that we've seen in the past, while we ramp up our housing production and try to reach our regional housing needs assessment numbers. I think a lot of people hear Measure RE is a tax, it's going to affect me. And it's like, well, if you're not selling your house, it's not going to affect you ever. Most of the people who live in the city will not be affected at any point at all. And if they are affected, it will be a marginal increase. And the actual rate of RE is marginal itself. So even though the average home price may be 1.2, 1.3 million, the Measure RE is designed in such a way that if that changes significantly, right now the cap is at 1.5 to go to another tier of taxation. That will change dynamically. if the average house price increases. So by and large, most people will not be affected, even if the rate changes. And I think that's important to underline. Most people will not be affected now, and most people will not be affected if and when, of course, the rate changes. And it's very important. But both of these measures help us keep people here and help us, from a policy perspective, address gentrification and displacement.
Absolutely. Are there any other state measures that you want to highlight, or propositions, not measures? Are there any other propositions that you want to amplify, or anything else that you want to make sure to get out to our Team Yasmine community here?
Well, obviously, I think Prop 16, which would make affirmative action legal again in California. I think that's, of course, something that we should vote yes on. One of the things that people often bring up is quotas, but quotas were ruled illegal. I forget the case, but you're a lawyer. You probably remember a very long time ago, and Prop 16 would not reverse that. Also, Prop 21, of course, would allow for a broader application of rent control, which would help people stay in California more generally. But locally, Measure J, which would provide more resources for the type of thing that people are talking about when they speak about reimagining public safety. Yeah. I think Measure J is incredibly important for us to have resources to address the mental health needs in our community, the social service needs in our community, and our ability to respond quickly when someone does become unhoused. And that's just Los Angeles County. It's not state level. But I think it's incredibly important also to vote yes on Measure J.
Absolutely. In the spirit of, I don't know if this is separate or it will go in the same vein, but with their Care First, Jails Last initiative, absolutely. I think what will it subvert about 10% of the monies from the county. So it's incredibly important. Thanks, Leah, for yes, we want to make sure to lift up schools and communities first. And all of these propositions, we want folks to do your research, but definitely support the measures that we've lifted up because it will absolutely have an impact in our community here and across the state and county. It's all about the ecosystem, making sure our communities are well. Well, we're a little over today, but I think that we had a really rich conversation. So I do want to thank you for your time. Thank you for your leadership. You're such an example for all of us. And so I just wanted to thank you for your time and for your leadership on the council and otherwise, and continued good luck in your doctorate program. So while that you're on the council and also becoming Dr. Lee. So continued good energy for that. And yes, thank you so much. If you would like to get in contact with Councilmember Daniel Lee, there are his handles. So continue to be engaged, continue to make public comment on the virtual platforms. Councilmember Lee, do you want to close out with anything else?
Just thank you for having me today. I think you would be an incredible addition to the council, and the perspective that you bring would push us forward. I really hope everyone listening today not only votes for Yasmine, but does as much as they can to talk to their friends and family who are also voters in Culver City, to encourage them to vote for Yasmine. There's a lot of very difficult work that our council has ahead of us, and I think it would be much more well-informed and probably, frankly, easier to do with Yasmine on the council.
Thank you so much. Yes, listen to Councilmember Lee, continue to vote. There's information on the culvercity.org on election information in terms of when vote centers are going to be opening, the dates of some of those. We know some will open on the 24th, but those will be rolling out. In terms of next volunteer opportunities, I will encourage folks to visit Vote McMorrin to sign up to participate in postcard parties. We're having one, I believe, on Thursday this week. We're having a phone and text bank on October 26th. And we're also having another Connect next Thursday with Council Member, or actually Vice Mayor, Alex Fish. So I'm sure we'll talk about housing and Measure RE and some other really exciting topics. So please be engaged for that. Don't hesitate to reach out to us. We're at Vote McMorrin on all of our social media handles, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. So don't hesitate to reach out. But thank you so much for engaging with us. And I hope everyone has a wonderful rest of your weekend, and hope everyone stays safe and well. Thank you again, Councilmember Lee, for spending time with us. And until next time, everyone, take care.
Have a good night.